Now, what we spoke earlier was more on what we would like to have when we do our things. Like, we were talking about contractual things, we were talking about tools that we need to have. Now I'm coming to actual operation. Actual operation compared to what I would like is very different. Actual operations, sometimes if you are not used to things, you can hear the sound of a well blowing. It's almost like as if you are standing next to a jet engine. There are things on the side, if you do not pay attention, can affect your whole system. H2S leaking can actually kill you. Things that fall down from heights can actually put you bedridden for life. Things that you do not handle properly. And let me tell you one thing that I'm there. If you see most of the accidents that happen, it is not the new guys who get hurt. It is mostly the old guys who get hurt. Why? Can anybody tell me why? That's why I said one thing. Carelessness or negligence. Anything else? Yeah, I have been doing this for 35 years. Now that is what I want to talk also about this code. Let me remind you all. You all have been doing some things in Ethiopia for a long time. Since when did you all start? Kifle? 1980 or 1960? 1970. So you have been doing something for the last 50 years. You have been doing some things. I'm not challenging that. But in future, you've got a better way to do it. You've got a safer way to do it. And if you do these things safely and in a better way, you can achieve your results better. These are some things that you can take back with you. Am I clear on this? Now let's go into actual practices. So here we got, say, most of the activities that happen on a rig site include drilling, completions, well testings, and also over the life of the well, you have to do some workover jobs. Okay? The health and safety requirements are covered by safety management of the clients of, say, like EEP themselves have a safety procedure. They should have. If you do not have, should have. Also, there is something that is environmental laws by the country, and then there are some other codes. The codes do not supersede anything, whichever is the first, but all these things together have to be considered at any time. Am I clear on this? There's nothing that supersedes. If something is going to be helpful, make the best use of it. But make sure of one thing, health and safety are not compromised. I cannot pay back to buy another eye for my employee or myself. I cannot pay to buy another finger for that person because it will be probably, nowadays you get grafting and all new things, but I cannot do that much. Or something that happens in the environment, I cannot ever fix it again. Bring it back to original state, sorry, I can't do it. That law helps to avoid those problems. Then, just as the question was asked, I wouldn't spend too much time, but I would just like to remind one thing. One of the things that you find different between oil and gas and geothermal drilling is the higher temperature. The temperature that you see in oil field is not so much, but in geothermal, you see temperature. Very high temperatures, and the first place that it comes out is normally at the shale shakers, when your fluid is coming out from the well. Be very careful of those places. Second thing is, even when blowout happens, this heat can actually kill you more than anything else. Then, you have a lot of problems with lost circulation. In oil and gas, you get many problems with kicks, but in lost circulation, you actually have something that is very reverse. So it is, if I have to explain to you in a simple term, when you blow out, that's a kick. That's what happens in oil and gas. But when you suck something in, that's what happens when you have got lost circulation. And what happens there, if you are in your well and drilling, and suppose there is losses, what happens? This suction can actually almost pull your drill pipe to one side of the well. Now I'll add to that. Because of that, you have things like stuck pipe. So these are things that are very different to what happens in oil and gas. Then the third thing is very crucial is H2S, carbon dioxide, and any sulfuric acid or mixtures of that, which actually are very dangerous, corrosive to yourself, to people, to equipments also. That is why I sometimes say, what we do a regular inspection in oil and gas, some of the things you have to do more stringent in geothermal because of the environment that it is exposed to. Even casings, when you buy casings, you have to specify that it has to be H2S not resistant. That is something to be stressed upon. Now, yesterday we did touch upon this, so I won't spend much time here, but I would like to spend one thing here, is you have to maintain, you have to always keep track of your drilling fluids in terms of properties. Okay? The other thing is monitoring the volumes. There are sensors around the rig which help us to monitor volumes. Be very sure to make sure your volumes are monitored very carefully. Because if you can catch the losses at the first instance, you can actually save a big problem. But if you are sitting there and then you have got all your well losses and you never realize what is happening, it's too late at that point. Then, also they give you very good indications of if a kick is coming in or if a blowout is coming in, your pit levels will start rising. If you are watching that very carefully, you can monitor that. If not, sometimes it's too late. When the temperatures rise up, yesterday we touched, so I won't go there, you have to have your cooling systems on. One of the things is, sometimes before you are doing this thing, you make sure you've got enough of water. I think this has been stressed, but I would like to talk about that once again. Please have enough of water as backup. Do not start drilling if you do not have water. Please. It's a request. Now you all can take it so that you all have, if you have learned one thing, please make sure you've got water. But just having water down in Lakes Y doesn't help. What else do you need? Your site at Aluto Langano is there, and there's Lakes Y. I've got water in Lakes Y. What else do I need to get the Lakes Y water up to the site? Water piping and water pumps. Also make sure, because that's a big distance. For example, I'm giving you've got almost 10 kilometers of line. Please make sure you've got a parallel line. So that if one fails, still you've got the other one able to pump. It's a fail proof. It's just a backup.
And storage.
Pardon?
And storage.
Got it. Now he throws in another thing. Storage. Thank you. Water pumped up from Lakes Y up to the top. Now where do I leave the water? Please make sure you have a pond. Right? And please make sure the pond is lined properly. Otherwise you are filling up in the pond. It is like this. You are filling, this pond is there, but what is here? There are holes. Is it going to hold it? No. So make sure you've got a properly lined pond that is able to store water, and then from there you have lines down to your site which is fed by gravity or by pumps, whichever it is, depending on your height, so that all these things work properly. Please make sure of these things. Yes? Yes?
To bring this the property of this mud.
Right.
Do you want to say about the chemistry of or the recipe of this mud? Yesterday we
Yes, it is. That is, if I have to talk on that, you have to give me about 1 week to talk to you on that. That's why I just cut short yesterday. Let me give you a simple one. Yesterday we spoke about chemistry, right? You've got bentonite. Then say you see viscosity. You've got viscosity means if the flow of the water, right? If you flow. If you want to change viscosity, you can add different chemicals, right? Then you've got gel strength. What is gel strength? The cutting that is down has to come to surface. So the mud carries the cutting along. So that means the mud has to have some consistency. It is like, if you got water, can you put water or stone and bring it up? No. But if you've got something like a jam or a gel, it can bring this thing along. So to do that, you've got certain chemicals. Then you got something like water loss. Water loss is, if there is water, there's water in the mud, right? In the bentonite. But if the water loss is not controlled properly, the water will go across into the formation and the water will become dehydrated. You know what happens to a person when he gets dehydrated? He shrivels off. Same thing happens to mud. So you have to balance that. Then there is something like solid contents or loss circulation. The biggest problem that we have in geothermal, loss circulation. So depending on the type of losses, we have different things to do. So if it is very small losses, just going slowly, you can put something like, sugarcane hull or cottonseed hull. That seals it. But sometimes if the loss is such that you cannot heal it, you sometimes have to have cement plants. So these are things that you have to, but that is why one of the things that you all have to make sure is, I see that across again the region, we do not have a mud engineering system at all. Even at EEP or GSA, I do not know whether you've got a mud engineering team. This is one of your most crucial parts of your drilling. If you do not have a mud engineering team, better don't start drilling at all. Have a mud engineer, plan this out properly, and then drill. Any question? Yeah.
We use
Oil-based drilling fluid in geothermal? No. All the time, oil-based drilling fluid is used only in oil and gas wells. Oil-based drilling fluids, what happens is, it leaves a big skin on the side of the well. In geothermal, we do not want that. Oil-based mud also increases the weight of the mud. What happens in geothermal? Our weight of the formation is very low. So we actually want as low as we can for density of the mud, that's better. So that's why we sometimes mix with air also, because the density of the fluid goes down when we mix with air. Because what happens in the problem in geothermal is that the formation density is very low. That is why we get losses. Whereas in oil and gas, the formation density, the hydrostatic gradient on the other side is higher, so it tends to come into the well. Yeah.
drilling geothermal wells, when we compare drilling geothermal wells with drilling oil and gas wells, can we say high intensity geothermal well when we compare?
Come back.
Which one is high intensity? Geothermal well.
Uh-huh.
Oil and gas well.
Probably oil and gas well is more costly because we use a lot more of technology in oil and gas. Okay? One of the reasons being that the oil and gas, money comes faster. Am I right, Gordon? Money comes much faster. In geothermal, suppose you drill a well, can you just put a power, can you go and turn your switch on? What else do you need? After you drill a well, what else do you need? Pardon? What else do you need? I have drilled a well, I want to generate power. What else do I need in geothermal? Turbine or a power plant, right? So the power plant is also again for a megawatt of power, you have to spend almost a megawatt of $1 million in terms of cost for a power plant. Whereas in oil and gas, I don't have to go through all that. My well is ready, I can open my tap, I can count dollars. Are you with me on that? That's the reason. Like some of the wells that you flow, you can make your well cost in probably the next 1 week.
How about the knowledge of when we drill geothermal well?
Uh-huh.
The top of the harsh environment.
Talking to one of those mics. Come up in front. Yes.
as well as the diameter and other
Right.
things.
Yes.
So, how about those things? Does it affect the cost of the well?
Yes. Okay. That's what your question was. Okay. Fine. Now, to answer that question, let me tell you three things. See, when you are going into a geothermal, that first thing that we touch, there is temperature difference. In oil and gas, normally temperature is much lower. In geothermal, temperature is much higher. So make sure of that first thing. So when you request even for quotes or a contract to be done, make sure to specify that you are going, they will ask you actually, normally the drilling contractor will ask you, what is your expected temperature at that depth? Based on that, he will suggest you the tools, number one. Number two is you have to think of things like hydrogen sulfide. Those cause a lot of problems to things like metal. So that increases your cost, okay? The third thing is you have to think of expansion. So when you think of things like casing, those casings are different to oil and gas. Because sometimes we have drilled a well in California where we drill in the southern end of southern part of California where it has got very high carbon dioxide content. So do you know what type of casing we use? What is the casing that you use here? What is the material of the casing that you use here?
K55?
Yes, stainless steel K55 or K55 carbon steel casing. In Salton Sea we use titanium casing. $2,000 a meter. The reason being, now why is it still effective? That one well produces 48 megawatts of power. One well. And that also is not open fully. It is open just about, where I have heard from people telling, when Wanderer 1, if you open the well even 25%, it is like a 777 jet ready to take off. 48 megawatts of power from one well. So when you think of that, when I am getting 48 megawatts from one well, I can put a good titanium casing. So you have to think of cost also. Did I answer your question? So these are the things. Also you have to be very careful is you get lot of loss circulation. So one of the things is when you drill to the last section of the hole, the production casing side, all your drilling, directional drilling has to be completed by then. Because at that point, I do not want to leave any expensive tools in the hole. I should be able to just drill at that point. Because that point, it is expensive to get in. And if you get stuck, it's gone. So let's continue further. Here is something. Again, you asking of when we talk of specifications, for all our drill string, our drill string is made up of drill pipe. You got drill collars, drill pipe, heavyweight drill pipe, drill collars, and the drill bit. That is sort of the normal structure. All these things have to be designed properly because you have to think of what weight you're going. That all has to be following API standards. Right? Number one. Number two, when you get new drill pipe, you still have to make it and break it first. Okay? So that you make sure it is all the connections are working properly. Now, after you drill a certain time, there are normally timings given, 48 hours, 100 hours. After that time is over, please make sure to inspect those drill pipes again. Very crucial. Because what he asked the question, do we enter into harsh environments? Yes. We are entering into harsh environments like volcanic rocks. It is actually pounding on the string. So what happens? All the shock comes back to the string. So that is where you have to make sure you do your inspections properly. It may cost you. It's not free. It costs you. But make sure your inspections are done. And if there's something to be fixed, fix it and run it in the hole. Please do not run uninspected tools in the hole. And when you make up the stocks, like when you are trying to make a connection, see this is one, the top and the bottom. So I have to make up the connection. Now how much do I tighten it? I can tighten something so much that it will break. But there is a specific point where we make. So those are normally set by the torque. Make sure your torque calibration is done properly. Because if it is not done, what happens? Suppose it is loose and you're running in. This thing is also turning, right? So finally what happens? It overtorques itself. You heard the noise now?
Yeah.
That's what happens. And then it can even fall into the hole. So make sure your calibration equipments are calibrated properly. And the torque thing, you do not have to ask anybody. Normally if it's a drill pipe, it comes with a certain makeup torque. It is already designated. Make sure to follow this. You don't have to ask anybody. There are specifications, follow this. Now you see something. Now it comes to a little bit of standard practice operations.
1 hour.
Okay. Are you all seeing this? Can everybody see this picture? Do you think something is right, wrong, good, bad, ugly? Okay, one is not properly done. What else do you see in that picture? Okay, no cover. Anything else? He said, so I'm just following what he's telling. He says it is not stacked properly. Some of them don't have caps. What else? Hey. Oh, he sees something is bent. Does anybody else see it bent? What should be the actual thing? It should be straight or bent?
There's a bend.
Huh? It is bent, right? Thank you. Everybody sees the same thing.
And
This come to proper calibrations of the rods or the strings. They have
Yes.
to be on the same place sorting well.
Right?
Because it's not like this.
Right. Thank you. You see what has happened there? You know, this pipe, when it went in the hole, was all straight. Okay, they're drilling. You remember how we showed you that gauge that the driller looks at when he's drilling? His gauge is not proper, so he thinks he's giving this much weight. But actually the weight is probably 5 times more than what it is happening. So what happens? This one string starts getting bent. Now those who are in physics, or if you all have, remember your old school physics, you know harmonic motion, right? So harmonic motion is like this, okay? Now imagine each of this pipe is 9 meters long. So if I am drilling at 1800 meters, how many pipes should I have? Hey, sorry, I'm just asking a little bit of math question. I am drilling at 1800 meters. Each pipe is 9 meters long. How many pieces of pipe should I have?
maybe 90,
Huh?
90, 85 up to 90.
Okay, let me rephrase. Did everybody hear this? Each of this pipe is 9 meters long. I am drilling at 1800 meters, 1800 meters. How many pieces of pipe should I have?
90.
200. Everybody agree? 200. Huh.
Have start a calculation, make up calculation.
Leave all that. Don't go too technical. Think where you are now. I gave you a simple thing. Each piece is 9 meters. For 1800 meters, how many pipes should I have? 200. Everybody agree? Now, out of 200 pipes, the first one down or the second one down starts getting a little bit of bend. Okay? What happens to the other pipes up? I don't know if anybody is good at dancing. If you dance, what happens here? This one starts, then what happens? You have seen snakes going, right? So the first one has got this. What happens to the next one? It tries to follow this. Then, by the time it tries to follow this, now imagine going across 200 pieces of pipe. Just because one was your calibration on that meter was not right. Right? You were drilling, thinking you were giving only 10 tons, but I'm giving 20 tons. So what happens? The whole thing is getting compressed. Right? Now imagine what is happening to the connections. There are a lot of things there. Okay? Now each of those pipes are not one string, single joint. Those are 9 meter joints, so they are connected. Okay? So what happens? This is dancing. So what happens to the connection? That starts dancing too. Then what happens? Very soon the dancing becomes a little bit more. That fish is in the hole. Big fish, yes, big one, shark or a whale, not even a small tilapia. So this is where you have to make sure your things are done properly.
So you
Then, yeah,
you know from the if is raining.
you can start, yeah, good question. See what will happen now as it is bending, see if it is a straight hole, okay? There is torque, okay? So if it is running nicely, so when it is starting to bend, what happens? It is touching this side and this side of the hole. So your normal, if it was running like this, if it starts touching here, what happens to the torque? It increases, right? So you will start seeing small spikes. Okay, normally it's running at like this, but when this one side comes and hits, a spike comes up. Then when it starts moving more, the spikes become more frequent. Finally, when the pipe falls down, is there any spike? No. Thank you. So here that was a very good question. Can you know this? Yes. You know, when we talk in drilling terms, we say something called the well talks to you. The well or the string will always talk to you. You have to have ears and eyes to monitor that. That's why I say, sometimes, yesterday we were talking about monitoring. Normally on my rigs, there is a monitor in the driller's place on the rig floor. There is a monitor in the company man's room. There's a monitor with the geologist. There's a monitor with the mud logging guys. So there are about 4 monitors. Now if 4 of these people cannot find it out, I don't know what to do now. What would you do about it? If 4 people are there watching the same thing, and if everything is working well and nobody is watching, we have to tie one of the cat has to be bent, right? Is everybody with me on this? Is it making sense? There are 4 recorders that are showing these things. First thing is, one I'll just like to stress here is, when you're getting into these contracts, make sure that they've got proper monitoring equipment, and proper monitoring of equipment can be done. People have to be trained also to monitor, because it is like yesterday we spoke of the patient. If the thing is like this, yeah, it is a good one, he's alive, right? But if he starts making different angles, so there are different things that you can infer, right? So the people have to be trained on deciphering that. Then make sure the calibration done properly and have somebody watching it. Please, if you can take this back as you go back to your jobs, please monitor things. When do accidents happen on the rig site? What time of the day? And there has been a study done on this. What time of the day do you think maximum accidents happen? Okay, let's go before that. When do you work on the rig? 8 to 5?
3 shifts or shifts.
No, how long do you work on the rig? 8 hours?
8.
So after 8 hours, what do? You lock and go home? No. So how long do you work? How long does the rig work? 24 hours, right? Now everybody is happy with that? We work 24 hours on the rig. What is the most crucial time that accidents happen on the rig? Please? Midnight. Say around 12 to what time? 12 to 2, 3 o'clock? Okay, he says 12 to 3. I don't know, because he's been sleeping. That's why. What else? What do you all think? Huh? Daytime, when?
The lunch time.
Oh, lunchtime, because everybody is hungry. Good. Anybody else? What do you all think? When does the most? Tom, what do you think? When does the accident happen?
Towards the end of the shift.
See, she told during lunchtime, the frogs are croaking in the stomach, right? Then he told towards the end of towards crew change or shift change time, because one person is thinking, oh, I'm going to go home, my wife is going to cook me so and so he's already in that mood. Right? Now I'll tell you, those are some other very crucial things. Yes, during crew change time, what is happening here? Crew change time, I'm drilling, okay? And everybody, and that's why we also have something, before I forget, we sometime on our rigs, we do a staggered crew change. So part of the crew, suppose it is crew change is at 12 and midnight and 6 o'clock. So half of the crew change at midnight and half of the crew change at 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Because that time, at least somebody is watching it, not everybody is moving at the same time. Is everybody sure of that? So this is staggered crew changes. Then, when you are crew changing, this is one of the times that things happen because you are about handing over, okay, I'm telling Tasfai, last 12 hours this is what happened. So, okay, this is what we are planning to do and so when we are talking, is drilling, have we stopped drilling? No, drilling is still going on. So what have we done? We have just taken our eyes off that meter, of that gauge. Suddenly pressure starts dropping. That is one of the times that accidents happen. The second time is what he said, about 2 to 4 in the morning. Because this has been proven scientifically or medically, even you can sleep 12 hours a day, but at night time, which is the normal body clock, that 2 to 4, however you have slept in the day, night time at that time, you tend to fall asleep. And one more thing, if I can request you guys who are from EEP and GSC, or whoever is going into drilling future, and I've seen this, and I'm very sad to say, sometimes it can happen to you also as a driller. At night time, please have a substitute along with the driller sitting on that rig floor. Have you seen that? There's only driller sitting sometimes. Have you seen that many times? Otherwise, everybody else has found a place to sleep. And this poor driller is sitting and drilling. Is he a human being? Yes. That's where we were talking of the buddy system. At any given time, there should be 2 people on the rig floor. 2 people at some of the pumps areas. Because those are times when things happen. And those things happen, 2 hours is a big time where things can go from bad to worse.
Maybe you mentioned now the drilling technology is improving, so you have automatic drilling, not person.
Right. Also, thanks.
Automation.
We got automation.
You
At
can
the
actually put cameras.
Right.
The drilling supervisor could put in the camera around the rig floor. You can actually observe what they are doing and what they are doing. So the technology is improved significantly now.
And I think so I would like to just grab one word out of what Kifle just said. Observe. Observe. I would just like to stress upon this word. Please observe and know what is going on. There are alarms. Nowadays we get better systems now where if I'm drilling with pressure, I can set an alarm even at 5 psi up and down. But please make sure to set the alarms and drill. I learned this the first day in my drilling days when I was taught this, and I've never forgotten that because that saved us a lot of problems. Especially when you're drilling at night, you know you are going to be drilling at 100 kilometers per hour. Set an alarm at 110 and 90. So in case you have set it at auto zero also, if something happens, it goes up or down, the alarm beeps. Many times it may be a little bit of a nuisance, but it can save you your life. Am I clear on this? So now here we saw there are tripping speeds. You know, sometimes there's a big rush. Hey, I want to go home. I want to run and pull out this bit and go. So he is running up and down, putting the blocks, throwing it in. All these things cause this type of a problem. We did speak about well control, so I won't spend much time, but make sure of one thing. Your BOP provisions to completely shut off the well has to be there. And then you should have it always connected to the first full complete line. From the kill line to the choke line. And then once you have drilled the first part of the well, where you do not have casing to surface, make sure to have either a diverter or a BOP always on the well. Please do not do without that. Here is, as per the requirements, you should have at least valve type and at least have an annular, and make sure there's casing head installed on the well head. That's the minimum requirement to have on the BOPs. And then when you have master valves, many a times people do not realize that we handle a master valve like any other valve. Be sure of one thing. I'll tell you first the cost of a master valve. It's about $50,000. One master valve that goes on top of the well. Also, when you handle that master valve, it is heavy. It has to sit properly. Please have the right equipment, trained people, and take time to do that job. Because this valve that sits on top of the well is the most crucial thing for the entire life of your well. Entire life of 25 years. Or when you have to change it, you have to spend some money and time. So make sure to handle that master valve very gently. If you can coat it in a cotton thing, I'll be happy. Silk, wrap it in silk and have it, that's happy. But have it, handle it very carefully. One of the things here is we sometimes do BOP drills or blowout preventer drills. A drill is very different to something that happens actually. But let me make sure of one thing. Please make sure that you all do your BOP drills regularly on your rig sites. What does that help? A BOP drill is something that you are trying to simulate. You're trying to simulate a well problem, okay? So what normally, when I used to be working, what we used to go and do, how will you know that the kick is coming? The first indication is there will be increase in level of fluid coming, okay? So what, and the first time I learned this is from an old driller again, old company man. So what he would do, he would go to the pit room and pick up the sensor. So what should I do then? The logging unit, what should happen in the logging unit? They should first get an alarm that what has happened? The level of fluid has increased. Okay? Then what does it do? As soon as the logging person tells that the level of fluid has increased, what happens? He calls up the rig floor, or the rig floor is also watching. They both see the same thing. Oh, the level is going up. That means the well is coming in. Next, what does he do? He tells the BOP guy, the controller, one of his guys, please go and check the BOP. Okay? Then he has to also secure the well. He has to put a strap, secure it, close the well. These are things that happen on a normal BOP drill. These have to be done almost like clockwork every probably once a week. And sometimes we get some company man who want to know how quick you are, they even will do it without telling me. And I would say I would do that always without telling the people. What am I looking for here? I want to know the response time. From the time that this person at the pit room saw the level of the pits going up, till the time that I've secured my BOP, if you can improve the time faster, that's best. But this is a practice to follow. Why? Because when the actual thing happens, then you know what to do. Otherwise, when the actual thing happens, now you're, hey, now what do I do next? Oh, this thing came up, what do I do next? Well, one guy is already run away because he thought the BOP's kick is coming, so he's already, and that is what is happening there. You see, that's a kick on a geothermal well. He's already run away because he didn't know what to do. These are something to be diligently followed. Now, some of the things that you can take into practice to avoid such problems. One is always make sure that drilling, you've got established circulation. So that, what is circulation? You pump mud from the pits through the pump, it goes into your standpipe, goes up into your drill string, comes back up to the surface. This is a whole cycle. And what she mentioned yesterday was about lag time. That's a part of the lag time. This is how much time it takes. Make sure before you start drilling, this whole thing is complete. You're pumping fluid, you're able to get fluid back. That means my whole pipe is free and clean. If you do not see, I am pumping from the mud pump. If I do not see mud coming back, let's stop, check, and then your tripping speed, when you're running in and out, make sure you're running in and out in a controlled manner. Then you see there, one of the things, the third thing, filling the hole. This is many times when problems happen. You know, after you have drilled to a certain depth, I want to say do a bit change, okay? So now what happens? I was drilling. Now I'm slowly removing all the pipe and I have to pick up a new bit. What happens? When I'm removing this, I have to fill this volume with fluid to keep everything under control. So we normally measure, if I'm removing this much of pipe, that much of volume should be filled. But if suddenly you see that either the amount of volume that I'm filling is more than this or less than this, that means you know that there's some problem, right? If it is more, that means I'm losing. Or if it is taking less volume, that means something is coming in. You have to monitor that very carefully. Then you cool your drilling fluids on surface. Make sure, because if you do not cool your fluids, it actually causes a lot of problems to other equipments on the side. Then this one. Where's my pointer? Okay, I got it. Sorry. Here, I would just like to spend a few minutes over there. Controlled rate of penetration. If I am a private company, I would like to drill fast. Yeah, if I can finish the well in 20 days, I have made my money. Right? But being fast is not the most efficient way. You might get a few, if you are driving from Addis to this thing in probably 1 hour's time, you might get a few stops on the road by the police telling you, oh, my dear friend, you are too fast. Or he'll send you a few fine tickets home. That is why make sure you've got controlled rate of penetration. What does that mean? When you're drilling, you're having cuttings. If the cuttings are not cleaned, there's a lot of cuttings packing up. So make sure as you drill, there's enough of time for the fluid to pick up the cuttings. So that keeps the hole clean. It'll avoid a lot of problems. Then the pumping down water down the annulus. Okay? When we drill normally the last section of the hole, where we have something called what we call loss circulation, where I'm not getting anything back to surface. I'm very happy as a geothermal supervisor. I'll be the most happy person because I'm getting total losses. I've got good production coming in. But at the same time, make sure that there is some water going down the annulus because that keeps the well cool. Because if you do not cool the well will kick up on you. Very crucial. That is why you should always have an extra pump, not only two, but if you have a third pump, so it can be always on the back side. You saw this picture on the first day that I showed you all. But here, in terms of geothermal, the moment we see some kick, any indication, be ready to have your water line that's connected ready to pump. At any given time that you're drilling, the other spare line that is connected to your water supply should be always ready to go. All that I have to pick up the phone and tell my pumping guy, please switch the water pump on. That is all. But please make sure to have that standby always ready. At the start of the shift, when you're checking everything else, make sure to check that pump is ready to go. So that if I need, does this one tell you and come when it's coming? The kicks don't tell you, oh, I'm going to kick the well in about 20 minutes. No, he doesn't tell that and come. If he was telling that and coming, it would have been a very different story. He doesn't tell you when he's coming. She just comes in. So you better have your things ready. But she does give you indications. If you do not take those indications seriously, it's too late. Now, managing hazardous gases. We did touch upon H2S, but here I would like to stress on a couple of things. One thing is personnel are not at risk. That's the first thing that you have to make sure. And to make sure of that, these equipments these are sensors that are recording H2S. Make sure they're connected and make sure they're reading well. That helps to prevent the first thing of not having personnel at risk. Then you have to pick up off bottom. If you're drilling, suppose I see H2S coming, I'm drilling. So what do? I pick up off bottom, stop my circulation, close my BOP, and that's my first step. This is a part of the BOP drills that we do, but this is standard operating procedure. Do not think of doing anything else at that point because you are putting everything else at risk. Am I clear on this? Please take your time to step back and read that. Now, this is where I told. Remember, we were talking about I have to secure the well. There's H2S coming. What do? All the non-essential personnel leave the rig site and go to the muster point. Which side? Which side do they go? Off? Thank you. So you everybody else heads off to the opposite side of the wind direction, right? Upwind, or simple we call it upwind. Go to the upwind side. Those who are on the rig side, there are the driller, the assistant driller, and the tool pushers, and the roughnecks. What they do, these are actually oxygen cylinders that are connected to the rig side, to the rig floor, top drive also, or to the monkey board. Do you all know what's a monkey board? What is a monkey board on the rig side? You know, we have these terms. All the terms in oil field have a lot of animal names. You've got a doghouse. The doghouse is where the driller sits. You've got a pig house. That's where at the other side the mud guy sits near the shakers. Okay? There is a monkey board. There's a crown block. There's a rat hole. There's a mouse hole. All these started from terms because, as you were asking, why only API? Because these are things that were made by people in the US or other places which were used to some other things. So for them, layman's terms were very easy. So where the Kelly goes is the rat hole. And where the drill pipe is put on the rig floor, that's a mouse hole. Now, there is a guy who sits up who works on the monkey board. Well, he is up. If you ever go to the rig site, you will see up on the mast, about down 10 meters away down from the mast, that is where one guy works. What does he do? As these people are pulling out pipes, we told that each of the joint is 9 meters, right? So when they pull out in 3 joints. So that's 27 meters. So this guy is up 27 to 28 meters high up. It is actually helping to pull the pipe and rack it back. Now, imagine there's H2S. This guy has only one way of coming down. He has to come down the step. Or he's got an escape line.
Yes.
If he has to come down the escape line, first he has to pull back, so the driller may be pulling out, so he has to pull back one pipe. So what he does, the same line, there is like a cascade, like what I'm wearing here. I will have a system in place with the mask, and there's a pipeline that's connected to my back. So I can actually breathe and work. Once that is done, you saw the other one, he had the cylinder, right? So what he will do, once he has secured the well, he will disconnect from this one, he will turn his cylinders on, and he will use the escape line. But that is where you have to make sure that every place that the people are working has oxygen to breathe. Anybody breathe without oxygen over here? I'll leave you all that question there. If anybody else breathes without oxygen, I think we'll take them to the rig site first. Then, there's one thing there. List of personnel and location to assist with accounting of crew when assembling at muster point. I think we stressed upon this, but this is something to be made sure. Whoever is on the rig site, please know at any given time the people on your rig site. There is no ifs and buts about this. At any given time, anybody on a rig site should be accounted for. We did touch upon this earlier a little bit. This was about, one was about casing storage. That's what we saw when casings are not stored properly. But again, when you are running in casing, they've got API standards to follow. And make sure that you handle them carefully. Many times when you pick up your casings, you are picking them up, it's banging around the place, things get damaged. And a damaged casing joint cannot be run in the hole. A damaged casing joint cannot be run in the hole. Then, you see here, earlier we saw the color of the casing. Remember the first one we saw, what was the color? There was a cross. What is the color of that? I showed you a picture earlier. Thank you. You saw a green color. Now you see what's the color of this one? Blue. Why is it different in color? Or just because they liked it? Does color difference on the collar mean anything? No, does the color, the one casing had green color, one casing has red color, they are called casing collars. Does the two colors have any difference?
Maybe type of casing.
Hey, what do you think? You're a drilling engineer, right? Hey, who else? Does color of the casing collar mean anything? Does the color, remember the first casing collar that we saw was green color. Now the casing collar here is blue color. Does it mean anything different?
Yeah.
What is it?
Because, it depends on the
Great.
color of the.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. All these casings have different colors to specify their different grades or different types. Why? Because sometimes on the rig side you do not get the most sharpest of pencils working. Sometimes on the rig side, the people who are working are not the most sharpest of pencils. They have gone to school and they just found, hey, okay, what's the next place? The roughneck goes, hey, when they are about to start drilling, they go to the schools or nearby, oh, this guy is okay, he's passed his 10th grade, let's take him to the rig. That's where he starts off from. So for him or anybody else, visual eyesight, if I have to pick up between two grades of casing, I can know very well that this and this is different. Because when they talk of two different colors, they talk of two different IDs or ODs. They cannot merge properly. So that is why these are very clear indicators of things. Yes?
I think it's the same manufacturer, yes. But it is different manufacturer.
It's not manufacturer. What did I tell you? You forget about manufacturer. It is an API standard. Whoever manufactures it has to follow the same. I think Gordon stressed upon that. It is not the manufacturer. This is an API regulation that it says that green color is for a certain thing. Blue color is for a certain thing. Red color is for a certain thing. They are standards that are set. Whoever manufactures, now let me answer your question. If a manufacturer does not know what color is putting, I would not even think of that manufacturer. Am I clear? Now you can tell, which is the right manufacturer or wrong manufacturer. Because these are standard code of practices. And if you ever get time, or if I can send you later, there are colors that signify certain things. That is why we follow that pattern. It's a color code. Okay, just to give you an example. Sorry. No, go ahead. Okay, you connect your power supply, right? What is positive normally colored? What's the color of a positive wire? Red. What's the color of the negative wire? Black or blue, right? Or red or green. Normally it's red and green, or depending on. But so normally if you go anywhere in the world, whoever makes that cable, it does not matter. Positive is always red. Am I right? So does that matter who manufactures it? No. This is the standard code of practices that In electrical terms, a positive is always shown red. Is everybody with me on this? So make sure that you all follow things that are done properly. Do not connect a positive cable to a negative thing. Then we can see the rest of it. Yes, God.
Yeah, actually, most of the casing, or the casing for the first 10 wells was delivered sometime early this spring. So they're probably not going to be starting to drill for another 12, 15 months. What sort of maintenance should be carried out on that casing over the next 2 years?
Thank you. Did everybody understand the question that Gordon was asking? He's talking of, we have got casings for 10 wells at Alu Telangana. Okay? These drilling will start probably 2 years from now or 1.5 years from now. Does anything have to be done to this casing that is sitting out there? Where is it stored? Where is it stored? Hey, at Aluto, where is it stored? Is it stored in outside, inside? Outside, right? Inside, outside? Outside. Under what? Under a tarpaulin or under the sun? Under the sun. Then somebody holds the umbrella when it is raining? No. Right? So now what all are falling on top of that? There is water, there is sunshine, temperature controlled? Is it temperature controlled? What is the daytime temperature at Aluto?
27.
What is the nighttime temperature?
Not sure, 15 or
Yeah, 15. I've been there, I've seen nights where we go down very cold, right? So what is the difference in temperature? 27 and say 15. 12 degrees centigrade temperature difference every day, right? You see the amount of things that are going through. Then what happens? If water falls into the casing, it goes inside. Does the spider or somebody clean it? What happens to water that goes inside? You start rusting. Am I right? Then we saw somebody comes and bangs the casing. What happens to the casing? It gets buckled, bent. Okay? Then one of our friends who is the guy who brings the cows around. He sees a casing. He takes a small stone and throws it on that. What happens to the casing? It gets a pit. Right? What happens to the pit? It grows. That becomes the start of rusting. Now do you understand why Gordon asked the question? I wanted to give you all a context. That casing, first thing, should have been kept in a protected environment. Number one. Number two, even if it's lying outside, make sure to go and clean it regularly, or at least put an oil coating. Normally you would put an oil coating. Make sure the casing ends are protected. Not that somebody is banging into it. Make sure inside is clean. Once in a way, just go and make sure we call it a pig. A pig is what it is we put a piece of ID, we push it inside and push it out. Oh, fasting is, no fasting today. Thank you. Yes, Gordon.
how about the threads?
Okay, now the threads. One side, we showed you that picture that I showed you. One side has a collar, so the threads are inside. But there's a protector always inside. Make sure that protector is in place. And once in a way, open the thread protector, check how the grease is, because sometimes the temperature difference, the grease tries to dry up, right? So you open the threaded protector, clean it, put some grease, put it back again. On the other side of the pin, same way you've got a cap like this. Open that, make sure the grease is not dried up, clean it, put it back again. These are some of the standard procedures that you have to do, because this casing is only going to be used 2 years after now. Is everybody with me on this? Thanks God for the question, but that is something very important. So one of the things, when we thought of planning, is before you start running casing, make sure you've got all the equipment handling tools for that specific type of casing at location. Let me repeat this once again. Before you start running casing, make sure you've got all the right size of tools to handle that particular type of casing on location. Why? Because before you run casing, what you have done, you have removed all the drill pipe out of the hole. So what is in the hole now? The hole is empty. If you waste a lot of time, sometimes even collapse and start taking place. Then, what happens? I'm picking up this casing. Sorry. I'm picking up this casing. Suddenly I realize, oh, this is not the right hook for this one. Then sometimes we try, okay, let's bang it and put it in. What's going to happen to that casing? I'll leave that to you all to imagine. All the cementing materials. Once we do running cement, casing, you have to cement it. The faster you do the cementing, everything is in place. Make sure you've got the second thing in place. Third thing, all the cementing accessories. Same way as we have casing accessories, we've got cementing accessories. I'll show you the picture in a minute. Have all those things ready at location. The fourth thing, the most important, measuring devices. You know, normally when we are doing cementing, we actually measure the cement density using a mud balance. Have that in place. Have your torque meters running properly. Have your gauges all calibrated, knowing how much of weight is there on the string. Please do these things before you start any job. Then, one thing is welding. That piece of casing is not a normal carbon steel, not steel, or not just any metal. It is actually made of a very precise metallurgical composition. Casings are made of very precise metallurgical composition. You can actually look up and you will see they are carbon steel, but they have got so much of alloy depending on the type of casing. You know, you got different names, K55, L80, all these are different types of casings. They have got different grades of steel and carbon steel. So, not every Tom, Dick and Harry, Mr. Welder can weld on that. Let me repeat this once again. When you are doing welding on your casing, please have qualified welders doing welding on the casing. Not everybody is qualified to do that. And the procedures are laid in place. Please follow standard operating procedures for welding on casings. Do not cut corners. Do not find a guy at Zuai and ask him to come and weld on your Aluto Langano casing. Sorry, my dear friends. I cannot stress upon this much more. Hey, he's also a welder, right? He is also a welder, but he is not qualified to do that job. Let me remind you all once again. So here is there. So when we are talking of the different colors of couplings, each of them have a certain torque to be made. Make sure you know what is that specific thing for that specific type of casing. Then always have a backup tom. You know, I always stress upon this. Sometimes in places like Aluto, you having a backup of a backup is better. If something fails, I've got something to fall back on. If the second one fails, better. I've got something else to fall back. Because at this point in the well, you have started a very important procedure. How important is casing? Let me tell you one thing. After you drill a well, two things that you leave in the well bore is casing and cement. You have drilled a well. Finally, for the next 25 years, what's going to be there in the well is your casing and the cement that you put in the well, nothing else. If you have those things properly secured, you've got your money locked in for the next 25 years. If not, think of spending some money again. That's why we stress upon this very carefully. How much time? 15 minutes.
10 minutes.
Good. Yeah, good, fine. Now, we were asking about cementing. So as we said just now, two things that are left in the well for the life of the well. One is the casing, and the second is the cement. So again here, the cement, yesterday we were talking with George about some of the buildings that go on around us here. Oh, the guy is mixing cement, he picks up one bag, drops in something, mixes, puts it on. Then he goes and picks up the next one. What happens there? Are you having the same type of cement in every bucket? No, because sometimes he puts more water, sometimes he puts less water, he puts less sand, sometimes he wants to save money, so he puts less cement. You are sitting in that house. God forbid how long that will stay if there's an earthquake. And I'll tell you why I speak of this. Where we live in California, we are about 15 miles crow flying, as a crow can fly, from San Andreas Fault. Anybody who are the geologists here? You all know the San Andreas Fault, right? Does anybody know the San Andreas Fault? Geologists. Does anybody know, have you heard about the San Andreas Fault? Or has anybody known of the earthquakes that happened in San Francisco? Have you all heard of that? Okay, if you have not heard of this, geologists or whoever is interested, it's the San Andreas Fault. That is one of the most tectonically active places in the world. One of the most tectonically active plates in the world. One of the other ones is in Indonesia. Do you remember that? In Indonesia there was a big tsunami. Do you remember that? Where was that? Sumatra, right. Aceh plate, in Aceh, that's a very similar, it's a subduction zone. Where in California where we sit, if I get an earthquake of about 3 or 4 every 2 days, I'm very happy. Why? Because the pressure is being released. I think Mashumi can tell about Japan, very similar situation, right? If the earthquakes do not happen regularly, I'm more worried, where is the big one coming? Because the small ones help to dissipate little bit of energy. We sit on things like that. Same thing is there. And yesterday, if you remember, Gordon specified about that. There have been some earthquakes and some wells have got damaged. Geothermal wells. So that is why we say, when you're mixing cement and things like that, make sure the quality of cement is maintained. For maintaining that quality, what do? We just do not mix cement. We actually, when we are planning drilling a well, when we are coming to the next casing point, say suppose I'm going to come to the next casing point in 3 days time. Already somebody in the lab, in another place, is actually planning everything based on an expected temperature and pressure. He is actually planning on a cement recipe. You know what's the recipe, right? You know, our ladies and those who do cooking can tell me, if I have to make cake, I have to go through a whole process, right? Otherwise, maybe the cake, it will look like cake, but nobody will want to eat it. Am I right? If you do not have the right recipe mixed, it will look like cake, but probably you'll have to force it down somebody's mouth. So what we do, we actually plan on a cement recipe, including, yesterday you asked waiting on cement. How much time will I take for the cement to set? How much temperature will it see? All these things are planned in place. We mix this and we prepare for the cement job. Then, I have to think of something. You see there is an overgauge hole. What is the size of the holes that you drilled at Aluto? One size.
8.5.
Before that?
12.
12?
13 and 31 holes.
Okay. What is the size of the hole that you drilled? 12, 1/4. She said 13, 1/4.
Not sure.
That's caving. Right, no, that's fine. She gave me, thanks for that. You gave me a number 12 1/4. Okay, or 12 1/4. Right? You are happy with me or you are angry? Don't. It's okay. Okay, so now the thing is, you plan to drill a 12.25 inch hole. Okay, this is my bit size. I'm drilling. Okay, is your hole always 12.25 or is it big or small? When you are drilling, I've got this bit. Okay, I'm drilling. It is 12.25 hole size. Does the hole always be 12.25 or it gets bigger or smaller?
When we go down, it becomes smaller.
I'm drilling 12.25 inch hole. Am I clear? Everybody on this? Anybody can tell me this. I'm drilling a 12.25 inch hole. That is the size of my bit. But actually the hole size, will it be exactly 12.25 or will it be big or small? Okay, now I got small or big. Okay, she says small. So when I'm drilling a 12.25 inch hole, the actual hole that is formed is smaller than 12.25. Am I right? That's what you are saying. No, leave step by step. Don't go to. I'm drilling a 12.25 inch hole. What is the size of my hole? Same or bigger or small? Same. Okay, this guy says same. What do you say?
When I say it becomes small,
Yeah, bigger. So I'm asking is, does the hole become bigger or smaller? Bigger. Okay, bigger or same size? Leave bowling out. I'm drilling now. What does the hole size come up? Will it be 12.25 or will it be big or small? Big or small? That's my question. Big. Okay, so here he's got big. He says big. She says, you say same size.
The same.
Hey, geologist. What does the hole size be? If I'm drilling 12.25 inch hole, will the hole size, actual hole size be big or small than 12.25? Huh?
Bigger.
Bigger. Oh my God. No. She says big. Yeah, 3 people are big. You say same size. What do you say? Bigger. Now he's in your same team. Now they are all Brazil. Now who else is not agreeing with him? Same size, bigger, small?
Big.
Okay, she now changed her mind. It's fine.
Smaller, so
Okay, good. Let's cut it short. Yeah. Small. Of the? So what will happen? Oh, you have seen that? Okay.
how about
Yes. That's fine. Good, thank you. So we all agreed to one thing, that the hole size will be almost the size, same size or bigger. It will never be small. If it is small, that means your bit is worn out. Okay? But normally what happens when you're drilling, there's always some chance of getting a little bit bigger. Right? If you can drill me the same size, maybe it is in very hard formation. Very hard formation, sometimes you get the same size. But most of the time you get bigger size. So, now if I have to put cement, I have to do calculation. So what do I have to do to take for the extra size? I have to pump extra cement. Are you all with me on this? It's the same thing like when you are driving from here to a certain place. Do you carry the exact amount of fuel or do you take a little bit extra? You always carry a little bit extra, just in case, right? Same thing happens here. To account for all the losses, you take some extra cement. That will help you in the long run. Are we done?
Is there any evidence about the size? You say it could be smaller, bigger?
Yes.
Is there
She.
any evidence?
Yes, there's evidence.
Wait.
So like what, remember yesterday she was talking about lag time. Okay? So now if the normal lag time is 70, say I give you a simple, 10 minutes. If the hole becomes bigger, what will happen to the lag time? What will happen? Thank you. So what you are telling about, you've got a standard size is 10 minutes, okay, lag time. If the hole is bigger, it will take longer to come up, right? So based on that, you can calculate your lag time, your hole size.
And also,
Good.
another evidence should be, when you lose the material,
Right,
that's another evidence.
that's another,
Big loss,
Yes.
whatever.
yeah. Thank you. Sorry, that's fine, go ahead.
Sometimes you have so many singers,
Right,
but
people for together.
Yes.
They need special cement.
Yes.
This is why the distribution for
Good. This question, thank you for that. Can I answer that, Judge? This question we had even when we were in one of the other countries in Africa. Okay. Did everybody listen to this question? Something very crucial. Mr. Tasfai says, I can find cement, Portland, I can find cement. I'm not talking of which cement. I can find cement even in Ethiopia. Why should I get the cement from, say, Netherlands or Indonesia or somewhere for doing casing cement in geothermal well? Am I right? Did everybody? Yes. Did everybody understand this question? I'll tell you, I had to literally, we in one of the other countries, we had the same problem. When we went to request for permission to import cement, the first question was asked, hey, we got cement here. Why do you want to bring cement from Indonesia or cement from Japan, cement from Netherlands? What do you think? Matthias, go ahead. He's GRMF. Now let's talk.
Well, I assume the quality of the cement is crucial.
Right.
Quality being specific characteristics.
Thank you.
I would say.
Yes.
One is A-class cement and
Uh-huh.
G-class cement.
Right.
A-class in the above.
Right. No. Leave all that.
Okay.
Can we find that?
G-class to
Can I use the cement that I am using to build that thing to build my cement, my casing?
G-class to
No, my question is, you see that building there?
yes.
They have used cement there, right? Can I use that cement to cement my casing? Yes or no?
Oh, different.
It's different, right? So that's why I was asking the question. When he goes as a regulator, he tells me, Sam, why do you want to bring cement from China or cement from Netherlands or somewhere? Why can't I use the cement that I use for this one? I think Matthias gave us a good answer. One is quality of cement, because when I cement a casing for 2.5 or 1,500 meters, how much is 1,500 meters? 1.5 kilometers. This whole cement has to have the same exact quality. I cannot have cement at 500 different, 1,000 different, 1,500 different. I cannot have that. Number one. Number two, these cements are qualified based on, as he said, temperature, depth that we go to, strength. These are not normal Portland cement. That is the reason why we use specific type of cement for specific jobs, not the normal Portland cement. Yes.
another thing, sulfate resistant.
Yeah, whatever. That's all parts of, you mix with cement, we mix different additives. Like yesterday I gave you an example. If there's H2S, you mix something else with it. But all these things are very carefully measured, so that if I've got 50 sacks of cement, and I can go from sack number 1, sack number 25, sack number 50, I should have the same grade. That's a must. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Sal.